How y'all doing? For this review, I'm going to go with a classic, and since I'm filming this in the middle of October, I'm going to stick to theme. I don't know how long I can keep up with this, so I'm just seeing what I could do. And I'm going because of October, we all think of Halloween and horror. I've been reading the classics, that's fitting of that. Last 2 years ago, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and last year, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and this time, I'm going to read Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera. Now, we're familiar with all of these, mostly through cultural osmosis. Phantom of the Opera has had many film adaptations of various sorts, and parodies and, what have you, throughout the years. About as early as 1915 with the famous silent film with Lon Chaney Jr., but most of you are probably more familiar with the whole Phantom of the Opera Broadway musical. However, when it comes to something, with classics like that, it's always best to go right back to the source, and that is this the novel that originated all that. So let's look into it. Okay, so the story starts off with a couple of new managers of the famous Paris Opera House. This book takes place in the real opera house that's in Paris, very opulent and all that. And new managers are taking over when the new managers retired, and the old managers tell them, hey, there is this ghost that haunts the place, and he has certain demands. If we don't meet those demands, he's going to cause a curse on all of us. Now, the new managers are skeptical to think that this is all a prank by the old managers and by many people who work there, who are actually there's a couple that actually work with the opera ghost. I mean, the opera ghost is asking for box 5 to never be sold. That is his, and also a certain amount of money be paid at a certain time, and a couple other things. Now, while this is going on, unfortunately, we're started with early on with the first death of a man. One of the stagehands has been murdered, by hanging. Now, we are introduced to the other characters of Christine and Raoul. Christine is the main female lead. She is the centerpiece. In fact, she's an up-and-coming Scandinavian singer. Her father was a violin player, and they try to make ends meet on the travels of playing music and her singing. And thanks to benefactors, especially after her father died, she is sent to the opera house to improve upon her skills and perform. Now, and we're also introduced to Raoul, a childhood friend of Christine's who's fallen in love with her, and now after a wonderful performance, the main opera singer fell ill, Carlotta, and so Christine is taking her place and she performs beautifully. And after that outstanding performance, Raoul tries to meet her in a room, and he hears a voice with her. Someone is with her in this, and it's telling her, and she is convinced that this is the angel of music, who after her father died is sent by to help train her into her abilities. But it turns out that, of course, as again many of us know, that this is the Phantom imposing as angel music. Raoul doesn't know this at the time, but as he starts investigating her, he follows her. She doesn't know. While she sneaks out in the middle of the night to the graveyard of her father's grave, he goes out with her, and then he notices that the supposed angel music takes her in. He catches a death mask. Okay, so now. Now Carlotta, the main opera singer there, who is jealous of Christine, is now a rival of her. She's trying to make her look bad. On a night where they were playing Faust, she starts singing. She invites friends over to try, to praise her and embarrass Christine. And of course, the manager is not, honoring the fact that the box 5 is not to be sold. Very bad event involving Carlotta's throat sounding like a frog, croaking as it is, and we don't hear much from her again, and a chandelier falls on the audience. Of course, after that incident with the chandelier, Christine is abducted by the Phantom from her dressing room and is taken to his house through the underground lake underneath the opera house. It's there where, this is where Christine does the famous unmasking of the Phantom, and he is a very visage of death. His skin is yellow. His face is, skull-like, sunken eyes, no nose, hideous looking, and been like that since birth. And, he's, because of this, he's angry that she snuck up and did that to him, and wants to hold her permanently. She eventually convinces him, can you just release me for 2 weeks, and I'll come back as promised. And he's going to try to hold her to it. This allows Christine time to go back to Raoul, trying to figure out what all this is, as she confronts him on top of the roof of the opera house, that what she went through and who the Phantom is, and she doesn't know what to do about it. She loves Raoul, but for his protection, he has she has to try and keep her promise. And of course, Phantom finds out about about her with Raoul and most likely what she's told him. So, after another performance of 2 weeks in, she is abducted again in the middle of the performance, and now Raoul, upset, trying to find out where she is, he meets up with a Persian who is connected to the Phantom's past. Oh, by the way, the Phantom's name is Eric, if you don't already know. And so, what does he know? Well, he has enough knowledge to help go in through the devices that the Phantom uses to go to the underground lake and try to rescue Christine. But I don't want to spoil too much of that, because she's left predictive. She's now he wants to force her into marriage, or he'll start doing more devastating stuff here. So, many of you already know, or at least think there is going to be this conflict. But funny enough, there was an animated version of this, not a well done one, but actually follows the events what happens at the end very closely. So, I end up enjoying this book, of course, and like I did the previous two. If I have to rank these three books together, personally, I would definitely rank Frankenstein on top. Phantom of the Opera after that, and then Dracula third. Okay, so sorry, Dracula fans, but it's a nothing against the Dracula book. It's a classic for a reason. However, one of the things that kind of hit me that I sort of noticed, I don't know if it affects a lot of you, there was like 2 or 3 times in the book where Van Helsing gathers all together and says, aren't we just wonderful friends, or are we just good people with our friendship and all that? Just kind of a weird, minor monologue a couple of times, where in modern movie critics would, if they see this in a movie, it's like, hey, show don't tell. It's kind of a literary version of that. Now, I don't know if you feel about that. Maybe that's just way my mind put that together, but I'm digressing at this point. However, I don't put them far apart, but I do put these two close together. For Frankenstein and the Phantom have something in common. Their appearances repulses everybody. The creature is from Frankenstein is put together by body parts to immense proportions and hideous features where everyone rejects him. His creator rejects him. All the villagers reject him. And no matter what good he has done, people reject him on his appearance. So he becomes the monster they assume him to be by his appearance. Eric, the Phantom of the Opera, similar thing. He was so repulsive at birth that even his own mother rejected him. And he travels on to the east, and he gains his abilities, his knowledge, all of these. He's built up to himself to where he can become the Phantom in Paris. However, unlike the creature of Frankenstein, and I'm kind of spoiling this about this, Christine gives him a moment of compassion. And okay, by today's standards, is kind of cruel and all that. But for those who've been rejected throughout their lives in some form or fashion, when they finally get that, it's legit and true, especially from someone you care about, it can mean the world to them. The Phantom throughout the book who's trained Christine to her singing abilities for a subject that he loves. He's writing an opera, Don Juan Triumphant. Interesting, because Don Juan's a handsome man who can get any woman he desires, and of course, the Phantom is the opposite of that. And he's done all this to try to make her his wife, but she just can't do it. But he puts her in a position to where more people will die, even themselves, if she doesn't accept him. But despite all that, she ends up giving him one moment of compassion that saves them all, in a sense. So if you live in a life of absolute cold, like the Arctic, your entire life and never known warmth, a tiny candle be worth more to you than it would be just as much as any bonfire that could be built. Just because it may not have much frame of reference, but that will be a sensational thing to feel in itself if you felt nothing before that. So that's kind of the lesson you get out of that. But again, Phantom of the Opera is a classic, and it's not that long really. Don't be afraid of if you're afraid of classics being these extra thick books that take forever, like Jane Eyre or Russian novelists. Don't be afraid of that. This is actually a relatively quick read. The Signet Classic one's only is below 270 pages, so it's going to be relatively quick. Reads well, but the thing is, why go back to the book? Well, there's always these interpretations, and boy, is there a lot of them, no doubt. From 1915 silent film starring famous Lon Chaney Jr., which, the famous unmasking of it, if you see any of that at all. Of course, the Broadway musical. Hammer Horror has done, a few iterations. There was even a 1990s rendition of Phantom of the Opera starring Charles Dance. Yes, Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones played the Phantom at one point. And another interesting fact, of course I found this on Wikipedia, is that the first American edition of Phantom of the Opera had paintings by Andre Castaigne, who I never heard of, but they're beautiful to look at. You should check them out. Now, of course, one of the things I made more impression on me as far as Phantom of the Opera was a cartoon from 1988, a badly animated cartoon. A very very simple one. There was not much fluid motion and all that, and however, the background drawings were well done. If I have to give it credit at all, but does follow more or less the events of the story. Now, after reading this and understanding the character's appearance and all that, one of my it's going to be hard for me to watch any iterations of Phantom of the Opera is when you see the Phantom as either just a scarred person or just half mask or partial where you see his mouth. It has to be full mask, but that may be hard to listen to the actor on stage or on film, and or it could be like Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd, where they had to take the mask off, was supposed to. But again, I'm digressing about that. But he's supposed to be full mask because his whole face is, an image of death. So see him half mask or where he's just weirdly deformed on one side or and what have you, it's just kind of just doesn't quite do it for me. It would be nice to see a live action version where it is kind of where with today's special effects it follows the exact events of the book. Only minor adaptations of it, but follows the events, and the Phantom is as he's described. Oh, speaking of iterations, there is a nice cheesy 80s somewhat slasher adaptation starring Robert Englund. Yes, Freddy Krueger played the Phantom as well. Almost forgot about that. So again, Phantom of the Opera being in public domain and like Dracula Frankenstein has went through so many iterations in television, comics, book, even additional books of what have you. It's gone through that. That's one of the reasons why it's still kept relevant. But on the downside, if that's all you know through the cultural osmosis of how it's passed down, and you don't go to original, you're going to be what's, I don't know the right term, construed by things that made the newer iterations made an impression on you, but are not from the original book. And sometimes if you keep doing that, you realize you just cannot find a form where sorry if I'm not finding my words at this moment here, but you're sometimes it changes so much. You wonder, why did they make it like this? Because they usually presume you already know the original material. If you know the original material, then you probably have no mind to changes. You know where the changes are, and that's just their interpretation. You can't tell the exact same story the exact same way every single time. They're going to do this. That's why you could enjoy these, the interpretations as you want, but go back to the original and absorb that. Have that as your base node and let everything else branch out for you. So, just a way to help enrich yourself and bring the classics. And oddly enough, I met someone who, I actually met a person not too long while I was reading this, and she asked, what was I reading? I mean, Phantom of the Opera. What's that? We're come to this now. The newer generation doesn't, you get a few cracks of it. It's like, I understand not watching watching anything at Phantom Opera, or of course not reading the original book, but never hearing about it at all. Of course, when I talked about her, she says, I think I've heard about the musical. Okay, not a complete loss, but let's not go there. Yes, expose yourself to the classics. Granted, if I was her age, a little younger, I probably wouldn't have done it myself. I'm kind of a late bloomer on that, but I'm working on that. But yeah, get yourself when you hear about a classic, in literature or history and all that, try to read that up and don't go beyond Wikipedia. Go, it's Phantom of the Opera. You can get this in any new and used bookstore in any way you want it, just like you could get Frankenstein or even Dracula. Just get the original book, absorb that, like it or hate it, just get that into your system, and when you watch upon that, you can appreciate or dislike it, based on what they do with it. So with that said, Phantom of the Opera, Gaston Leroux, and thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.